I'm Joe Burke from PopXCast, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all of our podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
This is the official GonnaGeek.com show. Here we're a bunch of geeks talking about geeky things. Each week we run down the latest news and happenings in the world of geek. These are your hosts for the show, Steven.
But what if I'm in the mood for a T-Swift story?
Chris.
I've heard the X is going to give it to you.
And SP.
That's how we roll on Gonna Geek on Monday night. We get crazy!
Gonna Geek Productions presents the official GonnaGeek.com show.
Hello and welcome to episode 228 of the official GonnaGeek.com show. I'm that guy you heard there, Steven Jondrew, and we've got the full crew. That includes Chris Farrell.
I thought you were a robot.
We also have the non-robot, or the maker of me, the robot, Stargate Pioneer.
Thank you for giving me credit where credit is due. I have created Steven the Robot, so every mistake that he makes is actually my fault. I'm sorry, guys.
You know, that's true. And just like a robot creator elsewhere, one day I will come and murder you.
That's generally how we submit to our robot overlords when that eventually happens.
Yeah.
But since I made you, your warranty is only good for 63 minutes.
Awesome. So in just after the show, then basically I'll explode. Is that right?
Pretty much.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Chris, you were going to ask a question.
I forgot what it was.
All right. Well, that's cool. Yes, we are here to talk about the latest happenings in the world of geek. If you've never checked out the show before, we do have a audio and a video companion. You can check that all out at www.gonnageek.com/show. And we do record this live Mondays at 8:45 p.m. Eastern time at www.geeks.live. We always encourage you to come on by. Heckle us, mostly myself, because the other two don't do anything heckle-worthy, but I do. So check us out. That's Mondays at 8:45 p.m. Eastern at geeks.live. By the way, if you do subscribe to the podcast afterwards, give us a special shout-out. Just email us, show@gonnageek.com. Let us know I listen on the podcast. That's show@gonnageek.com. And say hi. And also, while you're there, again, give a full list, if you like, of all the reasons why SP and Chris are better than me. If you have that much time, you probably don't.
Wow, that would take all of Mardi Gras all the way through.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and roll into the news. Here we go. Oh, this is fun. This news point here is one that I've been actually waiting for a little while, and I was happy to see it come out this week. I do like phone leaks. We talk about them quite regularly on here, and the rumors have been cooking up about the S9 since last year when Google dropped the headphone jack, and people are like, well, will Samsung finally follow? Well, now looks like we're looking at our first peek at what this year's Samsung lineup's going to be. And Chris, why don't you tell us all about that?
That's right. So if you have been paying attention, a lot of the tech sites, pretty much all the specs for the Galaxy S9 have leaked. We have an idea of what it's going to look like, what this phone's going to feel like. But here is what is the most interesting leak that could have happened. It happened on Reddit earlier this week, or late last week, I guess it was, where an anonymous Reddit user had 20 minutes of hand-on time with, quote, a very close to production, end quote, Galaxy S9. He then posted an AMA thread on Reddit and Ask Me Anything, in which he answered questions over the course of 12 hours. He posted 75 comments in this AMA thread, giving details as to just what we're going to see in the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus. So, assuming you believe the fact that this guy has actually handled this phone and had some experience with it, it sounds like we could be getting a pretty interesting device. So this is slightly different than all the spec leaks. This is some user-backed opinions on things. So the user did reaffirm that visually the new Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus are pretty much identical to what we saw last year in the S8 and S8 Plus. According to them, it's impossible to distinguish them from the front. In fact, I was really so surprised at the fact that it looked like I was holding an S8. It's really that similar. The only difference being around the back, they have moved the fingerprint sensor and centered it beneath the camera lens on the new Galaxy S9 phones, and the S9 Plus now has dual lens cameras on the back. The important thing on this, though, is they moved the fingerprint sensor to being in the middle on the back. If you have a phone, an Android phone nowadays, most of the sensors, they're right in the middle of your phone right here. The way Samsung had it is the cameras were here and there was a fingerprint sensor right next to it. So inconvenient. You were constantly smudging your camera lens. It's a smart decision to have moved the fingerprint sensor to center on the back, especially if you can't get it underneath the screen like had been rumored. So that's a smart move by Samsung. Plus, you'll still have all of your iris login and stuff like that if you want.
That still seems kind of high. Like, it's okay for people like ourselves who have bigger hands, but I think as somebody who has a small hand, and that's still to me an odd choice to place it.
It's been that way on a lot of phones for years now.
But right up high still? Like,
well, the way it reads to me is it's going to be about where you see on my phone here. It's going to be beneath the cameras. The cameras are here. There's a little bit of distance. And the early screenshots we've seen showed it being about 2/3 up the back of the phone.
I misunderstood. I haven't seen the pictures. I thought you meant it was like literally right below the camera, and I thought that's not much better than where it was. Okay.
No. It's equivalent to what you've seen in a lot of modern day Android smartphones where they've placed it now, which I think is better.
Not working. It's not working. I'm pressing right there and it's not working. I'm pressing right on the Apple. It's not working.
You're touching it the wrong way.
You know, okay, so two funny Apple stories. Number one, first
he's going to make up for backing Apple last week. He's back to be like, screw you, Apple.
They're actually not Apple. They're both case related. So I had a relative over this past weekend, and she's looking for a case for her iPhone, and she went into some stores around here and looked, and had no idea why there was a hole on the back. And she goes, well, why is that supposed to be there? And then the person selling says, well, because you've got an expensive phone and people like to show off the Apple. And she goes, no, you're joking, right? So it's such a crazy thing for me to see that hole. I know it's been around for years. I remember the first time I ever saw that, but it's just like, at least mine is functional. Okay. Mine on my Pixel 2 has an actual fingerprint reader there. So that's cool. Second story as well. I know somebody also who I'll leave nameless that got a case for their phone, and the common complaints on that case, it's a wonderful case, but it's that the Apple is off center. I know.
Wow, I never knew. All my OtterBox cases actually on
like
the iPhone 4, on the 5S, and the 8 Plus, and also on my predecessor 6 Plus. They all have space for the Apple. I didn't realize that. That shows you how much I look at the back of my phone.
And they are all off center too. So check that out at gonnageek.com/228. You can see that there, and they're completely off center. SP, all of them.
They're good. They're on the center.
Okay, so I gotta say though, then that's good to see they put that where it belongs on the back center. Like I said, I didn't see the leaks yet, Chris, but I do think that's the most sensible spot for a fingerprint reader, and I will argue that until I see something that is new and completely different that is even better. But in the center, it's really easy when you pick it up, just right there.
You get used to being able to pull your phone out of your pocket and have it be unlocked as soon as you turn around and look at it. It's a very nice feature. But speaking of nice features,
the perfect time to take it from you. You taking it out of your pocket, and it's unlocked, and I take it from you, and I can buy stuff.
Well, you already got my ID because you built me. But anyways, continue with your point there, Chris.
So speaking of some of the other cool stuff, the user did confirm a recent rumor the Galaxy S9 has stereo speakers as well. One in the earpiece and a second one at the bottom of the phone, just like we've seen in the recent iPhones. According to the Reddit user, it is, quote, a major improvement, end quote, compared to Samsung's current Galaxy line. So
is this forward-facing speakers or up the top and down the bottom?
So one is in the earpiece and the other is at the bottom of the phone, and they didn't specify where at the bottom. I don't know. So I would hope one is forward firing.
Yes, I would hope that if it's stereo speakers that they would be forward facing. Actually, I was thinking about that the other day. The iPhone 8 Plus does not have forward facing speakers. It's on the bottom. So I would appreciate an Apple phone to do that next time.
Right. So the Reddit user did have two more things he touched on. First of which being the Galaxy S9 camera. Supposedly it was better photo quality from what he'd seen before. 4K video support at high frame rates. However, the 1000 frames per second slow motion capability is not supported on the Galaxy S9.
Not to mention the amount of data that's going to fill up the phone. Oh my gosh,
remember,
4K?
These are all like 64 gig phones by default with a tray where you can put in a micro SD card. So theoretically, you could make it larger, but 4K, you're going to fill that sucker up fast.
You're going to take 32 seconds of video and the phone's going to be full.
That's assuming you don't have anything else on the phone already.
True. Sounds though like it's just a marginal improvement. Fixed the big problems from the S8, and that's about it.
It's an incremental update. I mean, that's what a lot of this looks like. It looks like it's pretty much the same. They put a beefier processor in there. There's more RAM in the S9 Plus that'll have 6 gigs of RAM compared to the 4 for the regular S9, I believe it is. It's incremental. It's the same thing that people used to say on like the Apple 4 to 4S upgrades and stuff like that. It's just incremental. There's some nice new stuff they're putting in there so that if this is the point in your upgrade cycle, you're good to go. The last thing they had in there, and I wanted to bring it up because I don't get this craze, but evidently it's a big deal, is the Reddit user shed some additional light on the upcoming 3D emoji feature, which is basically Samsung's copy of Animoji that we've seen on iPhone 10. According to the Reddit user, it's not a one-to-one copy of Animoji, but instead offered a slightly different user experience that is apparently better in some ways, but worse in others. His direct quote was, "They're not a direct ripoff of Animoji, more like a mix between Animoji and Bitmoji. You create an avatar and you can control its facial features similar to an Animoji. In my opinion, it looks less polished than Apple's version. They're similar but different things. If they're worth the hype or not is another question. Personally, I don't care at all about Apple's Animoji, and I don't care about Samsung's avatar thingies." Me too. I don't understand. Why do I want to animate my face as a piece of poop and send it to someone?
Okay, so here's the thing, Chris. I saw the commercials everywhere. I thought they were very annoying. It was a little bit made me feel dirty in a few different ways, but I am only looking for when this technology takes off and there is an XSplit plugin, because then we will save all of the video viewers from having to see our ugly mugs, because I will just replace all three of us with Animojis.
With poop emojis?
No, just Animojis. So again, if you're not watching the video side of things, you better watch it now. Check us out. It's gonnageek.com/show, because soon it will be a collector's item. We will all be animated.
Yes, you'll never be able to find these old videos on YouTube. We don't put them there at youtube.com/gonnageek whatsoever.
Here's a fun fact. I have secretly within there, I've put a little bit of something that in about a year's time, I'm going to go file my own copyright on that little nugget. And then all of the videos are going to get taken down because of my copyright.
Did you put a countdown in our videos somewhere, Steven?
I did.
Okay. I thought so.
All right. Well, thanks for letting us know all about that there, Chris. And if you are looking for a new phone, this definitely looks like it'll be still another front runner. I think that's probably safe to be saying at this point. Next up, I'm going to tell you a little bit about something called the Google. I know you're going to be completely shocked to hear this, but Google sometimes mines data. I know what you're saying. Yes, Google is infamous for getting in trouble for mining a little bit too much location data. If you haven't seen it before, they've been in trouble from just on their handsets to the Google Maps features to their cars pulling all sorts of data as they drive around. Yes, Google likes to mine data. Now, generally you say, but I think that's a bad thing. In this case, not so much, because they are working with emergency services to test sharing that data in an emergency situation. Because if you don't know this, just dropping the whole facade about, oh, big bad Google, so many of these phone companies do mine your data these days. It's just the way that it works. And there's a lot of that does happen where your precise location is being captured, whether it's by an app or a handset. And Google does this. Well, they have been testing this, and they recently facilitated a trial to determine how efficient their location data was with helping 911 operators to pinpoint emergency calls with more precise accuracy. The Wall Street Journal reported that this test was performed in conjunction with West Corp and Rapid SOS 2 companies connected to 911 centers. Currently, 911 systems require wireless carriers to provide the location information in emergencies, and it's not always accurate. And with this test, operators were able to acquire more accurate location data from about 80% of the test calls within the first 30 seconds, which it also it brought down sort of the scope of where the person was down from 522 feet to 121. So quite a significant increase. And this is how I like to see this data being shared, because if you have a modern phone, you need to know your data is being captured. And if someone's going to capture it, at least let's try to put some good out of that when it's needed. So I thought this was very fascinating to see Google trying this, and power to them, because they're going to do it anyways.
I like the increase in the accuracy data for such things as emergency events, whether it's a large building fire or whether it's an earthquake situation where you have multiple issues of buildings collapsing, whatever. It would help to isolate. Now, there's no guarantee that the individual is going to be near their phone at that point in time. And of course, the phone's going to run out of battery probably within a day or so. But it's still something to look forward in the future to assist rescuers.
Absolutely. Chris, what's your thoughts?
It's a pretty powerful tool. I mean, I'm happy to see them doing it. I wonder how it is impacted if I turn off location services and a lot of those settings that you have to dig deep into Google's Android settings to disable, because you can make it be set up so that it's not going to use location services, so it doesn't do passive Wi-Fi scans even when your Wi-Fi is turned off. And I've had to do some of that in the past because I go places where I'm not supposed to have Wi-Fi on at all. And even when it's turned off, I don't want the Wi-Fi turning on. So I have to dig into the settings and say, hey, turn off this passive feature where it basically scans the Wi-Fi networks around you to know where you are. It's annoying.
I was driving down the street back from the grocery store, and all of a sudden, boom, you don't have the password for this Wi-Fi. Of course I don't. It's somebody's house on the way. Why are you doing this? I turned this thing off. So I got to go back in the phone and turn that off.
I think we should just point out here that Chris Farrell gets engaged, and then all of a sudden his location services go off. Just putting that out there. Coincidence?
Yes, Stephen, part of the terms of my getting engaged was I couldn't let you know where I was at all times anymore. They were tired of having to share me with you, rather.
Okay. You know what? That's a fair reason, because
that's what happened.
All of Stephen is very, very obsessive. Very obsessive.
I miss you, Stephen.
I miss you too, Chris Farrell. Next up, we're going to talk about something that spent a few more days on Mars than Matt Damon, right, SB?
Yeah, just a few more days. Not very many, just a few more days. Yeah, we've been talking about Starman, who was supposed to be on his way to Martian orbit, ahead of the planet, not exactly around the planet, just in the Mars orbit around the sun. Well, we've actually already had several cars on Mars, and one of the cars that is still active is called Opportunity. You've heard of Opportunity and Spirit rovers. If you haven't, I'm talking about them now. They will be on a future SP Space Symposium sometime in the future. And in this article on space.com, written on February 16th by space.com senior writer Mike Wall, said that NASA's golf cart size Mars rover Opportunity has just rolled past another big milestone. The milestone is 5,000 souls on the red planet. What's a soul? It's a Martian day. So Opportunity touched down on Mars in January 2004, and the mission was originally envisioned just to be 90 days. Well, we're talking about a soul, which is, by the way, about 40 minutes longer than an Earth day. So last week, if you factor in the 40 extra minutes a day and all the days since it touched down in January in 2004, on February 16th, 2018, Earth time, Opportunity reached soul number 5,000. This is something that was only supposed to last 90 days, and it's now on soul 5,000. So Opportunity actually landed a couple of weeks after Spirit, its twin rover, and it also set off on a 90-day mission. But both rovers were looking for signs of water activity on Mars, and both found plenty of evidence of water throughout the ensuing 5,000 days. Spirit outlasted its warranty, but unfortunately fell silent in 2010 after getting bogged down in soft Martian sand, basically Martian quicksand. NASA declared the rover dead about a year later, but Opportunity continues to roll on. And every day it adds to its off-world driving record, which right now stands at 28.02 miles. And by the way, in second place is the Soviet Union, so Russia, back in the Cold War. They had a Lunokhod 2 rover, which I'll talk about in a future SP Space Symposium, which traveled 24.4 miles on the moon back in 1973. So back to Opportunity, the rover has beamed about 225,000 images back to Earth during its 5,000 sols, and it just keeps on going. And by the way, if you want to know about a size comparison, Golf Cart is actually an ample description of how big this rover is. If you remember seeing The Martian, you remembered seeing the Sojourner little rover, and that was basically remote control car. And then you go to the Curiosity rover, which if you happen to have Amazon's personal assistance device, you can ask for a Mars Curiosity update, and the device will give you that update and tell you what's going on with Curiosity, not Opportunity, Curiosity. And Curiosity is basically like a truck-sized rover. So there you go. There's the three different sizes of rovers.
GMC Sierra?
4x4, yeah.
Crew
Yeah,
cab.
I thought so. I was
Crew
waiting.
cab,
I was hoping you get that product placement in.
Well, that's generally reserved for the SP Space Symposium, so any other time that we can get that product placement in is good, and I'm glad that you were able to do that. We are now able to charge GMC for this episode.
I was just hoping you'd get your GMC Sierra 4x4 crew cab at some point in time, SP. And by talking about your GMC Sierra 4x4 crew cab once, maybe someone from GMC will find out that you want a GMC Sierra 4x4 crew cab.
By the way, if you do make that deal happens, the side needs to say SP is awesome. As it is all say, it's just SP is awesome.
No,
Be
it's
very
got to say
modest.
SP Space Symposium on it.
No, just SP is awesome. Okay, so the 5,000, I read about this. This is really cool. I actually get really giddy about any of the Mars rovers. I think that it's just so fascinating to think about us having something on another planet that is exploring. Yes, I got super excited about the Tesla in space, but the rovers are where I can spend hours just heading down a dark Wikipedia hole and whatnot. It's fun for me. And I will say this, I never thought about the question until you actually linked this news story. And I don't know if you have the answer, but do they just shoot the target dates really low for budgetary reasons and just in case something goes wrong? Like, because 5,000 versus 90 is a massive difference. How do they establish that baseline?
So the baseline is established via tolerances and requirements for the mission. And if it exceeds that, so much the better. But it was just designed for 90 days. So anything that get beyond that is just bonus. Satellites do this all the time where they're only supposed to last so long. And then either due to the fact that the satellite itself is exceeding expectations, or maybe the next generation satellite isn't ready to come up, replacement satellite isn't ready to come up, or maybe they're trying to save money. They don't shoot it off until the actual satellite that it's replacing, like communication satellite, weather satellite, something like that, is still functional. So they just don't replace it. In this particular case, we're just milking this for everything that we can because it takes 6 months to get there. It's enormously expensive in terms of rocket fuel to lift something like this up there. So it just doesn't happen very often. These are science budgets. They are not the budgets of military, even though it's billions of dollars that goes into this sort of stuff. The money goes fast when you're talking about lifting stuff into space and then operating it, because you have a whole team that's controlling the rovers in this particular case, that's trying to plan out the missions, that's actually looking at the science data as it's coming in, even if it's just imagery, and they're planning, what do we do next? What if it keeps rolling into this summer? What are we going to do next winter? How are we going to be able to clean off the solar cells and try to get a little bit more efficiency out of the electrical system? So yeah, it's all based on tolerances. And if it's just meant to last 90 days, that's great. Take a look at Apollo 13. we don't care what it was designed to do. What can it do once it gets there, sort of thing. So after it creates that, or after it expends that 90 days, anything is bonus, and they just use it as best they can for as long as they can. Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 are great examples as well.
And it must be really hard, though, when the flat part of Mars ends up blocking the sun. That must be really hard. Big flat Mars.
Are you a flat Marser?
No, I am not. I thought you were asking Steven, because we know he's a flat earther and probably a flat Marser as well. But no, in the flat Mars construct, I have no idea because I don't believe in it, but I believe that the sun is always on top because it's basically there on a big cell tower.
Right. Also on a studio lot, Warner Brothers. It's filmed right next to Arrow.
Are you sure it's Warner Brothers and it's not like Sony, because they could use the extra dollars?
No, I'm pretty sure that Stephen Amell comes over and he's the one that dusts things off.
I'm pretty sure it's 20th Century Fox, and Disney's going to buy them so they can go do stuff on the Mars set for the next Avengers movie.
Here's something I got to ask you guys, because I really have not paid attention to it because I really don't care. But since you bring it up, is it 20th Century Fox or is it 21st Century Fox?
It's 21st. It's
Who cares?
21st, isn't it? Didn't they change?
Google time!
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they changed back in the 2000s. They switched to 21st. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
And if you watch
Yeah.
Futurama, it's 30th Century Fox.
That's true. All right, well, moving on to our extra news section here. Let's talk about something that sure is fun and shows how amazing our scientific research is. That's right. If you're not familiar with science journals, they have nearly become a sham. Okay, I'm just going to come out and say it, that most of they are nearly becoming a sham because many of them are accepting payment for articles. Last year we heard about how one, I don't want to say troll, because troll's such a term that's not, I want to give this person credit, but it was a troll came out and submitted an article to a bunch of science journalists or journals and got it successfully published about Star Wars midichlorians. And they successfully got an article about Star Wars published. Well, yeah, it's always Star Trek versus Star Wars, right? And so, of course, we ended up with somebody who decided to submit and get successfully published a fake paper based off of the classic, the wonderful, the top-rated Star Trek, not just Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek episode from the Star Trek Voyager titled Threshold. If you're not familiar with which episode Threshold was the one where Tom Paris broke the Warp 10 barrier and became a weird creature in space and then mated with Captain Janeway. And they had babies, and those little iguana babies were left on a planet. And it was admittedly one of the worst episodes, joking aside, one of the worst episodes in all of Voyager. Even the writer, I forget which writer it was, ended up calling this like a real low point. I think he was quoted as saying it was a, quote, stinker. So it was a really, really, really bad episode of Star Trek Voyager, and definitely a horrific Star Trek episode in general. So yeah, obviously somebody decided to take the premise of this episode, which again was him evolving into some form of weird creature, and they got it successfully published in a scientific journal because he paid $50.
Yeah, I had successfully brain bleached this episode from my mind, and just seeing the picture in the article of those creatures brings it all back. And oh my, I just...
And if you want to check out this article, by the way, you can go to www.geeks.link/science. Geeks.link/science will always refer to this wonderful Voyager episode.
That's the link that you want to use for science.
Yep, geeks.link/science forever. Horrific. And it really does, these sort of things, I laugh because they point out how poor the situation has become with science journals. Sucks.
It's depressing, but I want to say that I read this article, and the last bit of text in the article is actually an edit from a previous version. And the edit states, a previous version of this article referred to the beings Captain Janeway and Tom Paris evolve into as space lizards, when they are, in fact, space amphibians. IO9 regrets the era and notes the delightful irony of scientific inaccuracy in a post about fake science.
Space lizards.
Space amphibians.
Seriously, this episode's so bad that I kind of want to go watch it now because it was horrendous. It was horrible.
It's the worst. Don't watch it. It's terrible.
Plus, let's talk about this weird, like, because wasn't the premise that they were future humans? That was where human genome was going? Wasn't that the idea of it? Because they didn't devolve, right?
There was something about hyper evolution because breaking the warp 10 barrier did something weird and crazy to them. It's garbage. There's a reason why they've never discussed it before. There's never been any other mention of breaking warp 10 and this happening before. And it's a reason why no other ship in Star Trek history has now broken warp 10, because this is dumb. They don't want to break that limit. And this is the worst episode ever. I think Ron Moore came out and said something to that effect when he was writing shows in Voyager.
Yes. And it was I really like the idea that Voyager set it up that there was some abandoned human offspring on a planet. That's what it was. Because they were humans, technically.
Hyper evolved humans.
I know. And that is an awkward walk of shame that Tom Paris had to do after. So there you go. And also in our extra news point here, we're going to tell you a little bit about something that was very odd, but not really unexpected. Okay, this comes from wonderful Google again, and also the wonderful Microsoft Edge. That's right. You know you love it. You love Microsoft Edge. And we're going to tell you about how there is a massive hole. Well, not massive, but a security hole that Google discovered. Because if you're not familiar with Google, Google does a lot of research to try to make sure things are as secure as they can be. When they identify something, they generally give a 90-day window before going public with the information. And Microsoft doesn't really like this practice. And they've had some situations before where Google's found a hole. Microsoft has had a bit of a problem with it and has created some friction. Well, this did happen with Microsoft Edge, that there is a hole found in Microsoft Edge. And the gist of it is that Microsoft didn't patch it because it was difficult. Yes, that's what they said, was that it was a lot more difficult for them to patch than anticipated. So it didn't meet the quote patch Tuesday that comes out once a month. And so it's maybe going to be in the next month's patches. But for now, Edge is vulnerable to this discovered patch because it was hard work.
Good thing that I only use Edge as a PDF viewer, because that's the default thing in my Windows.
So you know, there is a slightly legitimate thought to this, is if they found the bug like 2 days before a patch is going out, or in a window where they don't have time to fully test to make sure that this update isn't going to break everything, it kind of makes sense to be like, yeah, we can't fit it in our time frame. Now, saying that it's too hard, that's probably bad PR. Their PR guys are like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but here's the thing is Google's come out with this now, which is probably, by the way, for you audio viewers, you should check out www.gonnageek.com/228. And SP has made a gesture that you can give. But anyways, we've heard about this. So that means it probably has been 90 days, right?
One would think, or it's just an FU move from Microsoft. Big, hey, remember us? We're Google. We got a browser called Chrome. We know you already use it, but just in case you weren't, here's a reminder why you should.
Yeah, that could be. And I know in the article that I read, there was some history with Google coming forward with information sooner than 90 days. So that could very well be. In any case, every time I try Edge and I give it a fair shake, it doesn't seem good. Still seems problematic.
Well, you know, it pops up as being X amount percentage faster and better every time you try to open something up with Chrome or anything else. Remember over here we have Edge. What the heck is Edge? The last thing I knew was Internet Explorer. Seriously, what's Edge?
Dude, it's been Edge since Windows 10.
I know. That's my point. It's nobody uses it.
To be fair, it's pretty great when you're doing mobile stuff because it's actually pretty battery respective. It doesn't crush your battery like Chrome and Firefox do. So when I'm on battery power on my Surface Book, I'm generally using Edge. When I'm plugged in, I'll swap back to Firefox or Chrome because they're a bit more battery hogging.
If I wasn't a Google fan, I probably would have gone back to Firefox. I've been having so much more problems with Chrome in recent, and I use Firefox quite regularly at work. I occasionally use it at home, and I will say that overall, I find it does seem quicker, and it does seem less bloaty than Chrome is right now. But with my Google life, it's just so much easier to just stick with Chrome and be all integrated.
Yeah, I love the 30 seconds it takes Firefox to load at work when I click the icon. It's wonderful.
Really? Mine's fast.
Yeah.
Maybe you just got bad IT people. Don't comment. You want to keep your job. Moving on, we're going to go ahead and remind you that we are part of the Gonna Geek Network. The Gonna Geek Network is an awesome place where you can find a bunch of geeky podcasts. If you've not checked out the GonnaGeekNetwork.com, please do that at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. And there's shows that cover geek sci-fi. There's shows that cover other random geekery. So you should definitely check that out. And in the latest episode of Operation Pug Podcast, episode 53, you can check out video games, Star Wars, Black Panther, and a talk about streaming culture and toxicity. So check that out at GonnaGeekNetwork.com, episode 53 of the podcast. And that is, again, at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Chris, let me ask you this. Why are you not making a brand new podcast? You should make a new one every single day.
Because I have to go to work and get paid to be able to do things like podcast.
Oh, well, you should think about submitting one, because
if you want to actually give me enough money, like you've been promising to pay my bills, then I will fully commit to a podcast today. I will do 2 podcasts a day if you can match what my current job pays me, Steve.
Yeah, that's
Chris,
not going to happen.
it's all legalese into the alimony because you guys got to get divorced before you get married.
And then we were never married. That's a common misconception. We didn't live together long enough for common law to take effect.
Come on, guys. I mean, everybody knows about it.
No, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, SP. Come on.
Except if you get legally married.
Is Vegas really legal? That's the question.
Yeah, unfortunately it is.
Yeah, you would know. Let's move on to our next segment. Here we go. All right. This is another episode of Steven's Geeky Stuff. That's right. We're going to talk about geeky stuff today. And this time it's the Pixel 2. If you didn't catch this in a previous episode, I did get a Pixel 2 a few weeks ago. Now, here's the backstory on it. Is, as you may know or may not know, I was an early purchaser of the Google Pixel 1. It was right up my alley. I needed a new phone, and it gave me what I wanted. And I loved the phone. It treated me very, very well. It had a lot of things that I liked about it. And honestly, I could have seen myself sticking with it for quite a while until all of a sudden the power button intermittently worked. Now, truth be told, it could have been something underneath the button, like a piece of dirt or something like that, because the way it acted, it almost seemed like there was something like that. But nevertheless, I had bought the extended warranty, so I thought I might as well get this dealt with and file a claim rather than try to deal with it myself, because I didn't have any other problems. And I ended up in the process getting a Pixel 2 because the Pixel 1 was unavailable. And when I went to go through the whole warranty process, it told me they were going to replace with a phone of equal. And I was worried because I like the Google stock phones, and I was worried they were going to try to send me a Samsung or something like that. But no, they did offer me a Pixel 2, which is how I ended up with it. So I never had any of those problems we spoke about last week on the show. Never ended up running into any of those. Just the button was the only thing that I had a problem with. And long story short, the Pixel 2 is very, very similar to the Pixel 1. Has everything that I loved about the Pixel 1. It's got stock Android on it. It gets very quick security updates. And the notable camera processing still happens. If you're not familiar with this, Google kind of broke the mold with the Pixel 1. They said, no, we're not going to bank on hardware. We're Google. We are going to process the picture and use software to make that photo look really good. And it worked very well. And a lot of people were shocked at how well it worked. So the Pixel 2 still does that, but combines it with some differences. It actually has optical image stabilization now, which is good because they only had software before. Other thing that I should point out here that's a little bit different about the Pixel 2 over my Pixel 1 was that there is no 3.5 millimeter jack on the Pixel 2. They got rid of it. Now, I will admit, I have fallen victim a couple of times. In fact, the first day I went and took it into the wild, I got in my car, went to go for a drive, let's preview the latest episode of the GonnaGeek.com show, and I went to plug it in. And there was nothing to plug it in because I forgot that it had no headphone jack. So easy fix. I bought some adapters. They're being shipped from overseas, so they'll be super cheap. It comes with an adapter as well.
Super easy. These adapters have to come from tens of thousands of miles away on a ship that is going slower than you can bike.
Only when you're cheap like me. Otherwise, I would have walked down to Best Buy and spent the $9. Okay, so instead,
There's Best Buy in Canada.
I know. But yes,
No wonder they're going bankrupt.
There is an adapter that comes with it, but I actually had a Bluetooth adapter anyways that I used to use in one of my cars. So I just just dug that out and put that in. So I don't even use the adapter. So what it does is it picks up a Bluetooth signal and then sends it out through 3.5 millimeter to my car.
Wait. You have a relatively new car, and this car does not have Bluetooth?
No, I'm talking about the one I take to work, which is the 2003 Honda Element. That's the one.
Yeah.
So that's the one I'm talking about. But again, easy fix. There are adapters, and the idea of me buying some generic ones from overseas is that I can just throw them everywhere and not have to ever worry about that. But it does come with one. The other thing as well, as I mentioned, the optical stabilization available in the camera now, and it does make a difference. I will say that I've noticed with the video doesn't seem to have to be cropped as much because of the optical stabilization. That was the way that the software stabilization worked, was it essentially cropped the image and tried to balance it a little bit. And I've noticed that with the video on the Pixel 2, it doesn't seem to be as cropped. As well, speaking of camera, this camera on the Pixel 2 protrudes a little bit, kind of like how you see on the iPhone and you see on some other devices. And I'm okay with that, because if you weren't familiar with that, the Pixel 1 had some lens flare problems, and I'm assuming this helped fix it, was by putting the camera out a little bit. It probably also to do with the optical stabilization, but in any case, the lens flare problem seems mostly gone. Yes, you're going to always get lens flare. Ask J.J. Abrams. It happens, but...
J.J. Abrahams.
Abrahams,
You said
sorry.
it wrong.
So a couple of things. First of all, do you have your Pixel 2 in a case?
I do, yes.
Is the flare above or underneath the...
Which brings me to my next point. I don't care that it protrudes, because the case itself is far further out than the actual camera. And so it's totally acceptable. It does not matter at all.
Good. So if it doesn't matter to you, then J.J. Abrams should use cases around his movies in order to fix his flare.
Absolutely, because that's clearly what it is. They were definitely not put in CGI, right? Definitely not.
So that's correct.
I like the evolution they've had on that, because you remember going back to the Nexus line, one of the biggest complaints people had with the Nexus 6P, for instance, as I hold it up the wrong way on camera, is if you see, there's actually a hump there that is my camera. Right here, there's a bump as it goes up. So there's actually a full-on hump that contains the camera and all the optical imagery stuff in it. And you know what? When I first got this phone, I was like, oh, this is going to suck. This is going to annoy me. It's not going to lay flat. Yeah, then I got a case. And my case barely has any hump to it, so it all comes out in the wash. The exposed camera lens issue is not really a problem unless you carry your phone naked. And I don't know about you guys, I am not brave enough to carry my phone naked.
But, you bring up the evolution, and it is interesting because the Nexus 5 had a similar camera hump to what the Pixel 2 has, and people questioned it. And then it went away for a little bit, and then the iPhone came out, and as I've said before, Apple does something and it becomes the norm. People gave the iPhone crap when it came out, and then all of a sudden everybody's doing it again. So it really is not a problem. And again, if it all contributes to the solve of the lens flare problem, I will take it 10 out of 10. No problem. The other thing that I want to point out here is that the color itself is different. Okay? If you didn't notice, the Pixel 1 looked a lot like an iPhone. Like, a lot like an iPhone.
No.
It was uncanny. It was amazing how many people that I had who thought that I was using an iPhone. And while that was fun, for me to occasionally go, yeah, no, it's not an iPhone. It got old really quick, and it was really weirdly satisfying to go to a phone that didn't look like an iPhone, even though I got immense joy out of tricking people for a whole year of saying, no, it's not an iPhone. But yeah, the color, it no longer looks like that. And I will say that the black version of the Pixel, and this is not the Pixel XL, this is the Pixel, it is very, very, very smooth. And what I mean by that is the colors are all very similar blacks from the different types of material. It all looks very similar. Sometimes you find that one panel looks a little bit off black than another, and they did a really good job with the Pixel. I think that it's a very overall smooth look, and I'm very happy with it. Some things that this phone has that I didn't realize that they had was, well, number one, front speakers. We kind of touched on that earlier today when we were talking about the S9 specs, and I didn't realize that this had the front speakers, and I've never owned one that has the front speakers. And it is a world of difference. Not only do I not have to turn the volume anywhere near as high as I used to, it sounds 1,000 times better. There's no cupping the bottom to send the sound your way. It is a night and day difference, and I'm very impressed.
I do have a question for you on that, Stephen, and it is in the car when your phone is going off. You know, I put mine in a cup holder as it's charging, and the cup holder acts as an augmentation to the speaker because they're downward firing. So you're in the car and you have forward firing speakers. Have you noticed a sound difference in the car between the two?
I would say I couldn't really notice because of the fact that I do generally have it hooked up to Bluetooth now. So whether it's in the new car or the old one going through the Bluetooth transmitter, it's going to ring over the Bluetooth, right? So okay. I don't know. I can't answer that. That's a good question, though. But from a day-to-day use perspective, it is amazing. I used to always have to crank up the volume, and now I don't have to run it anywhere near that high. So I quite like that. The other thing that was really weird for me to find out about was edge squeeze. If you haven't seen this active squeeze or active edge technology, whatever it's called, you literally squeeze the edges of your phone. You grab the bottom and you squeeze. You just make a very simple squeeze gesture and Google Assistant comes up. I had no idea this was a thing. This is apparently an HTC feature. HTC's had this on some of their phones, and if you didn't know, the Pixel and the Pixel 2 regular versions were built by HTC, essentially, and it's kind of useless in the fact that it only will, at the moment, out of the box, without some creativity, will let you prompt Google Assistant. But I have found several occasions where I used to say, okay, Google, to trigger the assistant, and now I'm just finding that as I pull it up, and it's easier just to squeeze the phone. So I have a little bit of use for it. However, I would really like to be able to use it for something other than Google Assistant. But it works really well, and you can set the amount of pressure needed. And it is really, really, really weird to feel your phone squeeze and feel it vibrate back. It is a very weird thing, but I could see this actually having some good use.
To clarify, before when you said grab the bottom and squeeze, you were referring to your Pixel 2.
I was. Yes.
You were not referring to another human being.
I am talking about grabbing the bottom of my Pixel 2 and hitting and squeezing it after I grab my posterior and squeeze it.
Well, what you do to your own posterior is your own business.
Absolutely. But yeah, I could definitely see there being some potential with this feature if they would actually add a little bit more options as far as configuring. I've read there are some ways to get around it, but at the moment I'm not getting into that.
Well, bear in mind, Samsung did the same with their Bixby button, and people built those loopholes to reprogram the Bixby button to do other things, and then Samsung fixed it so that you couldn't. So this is the current trend, it would appear, is to build dedicated buttons to your voice services on Android phones, and I'm not sure I quite care for it. I guess it's wait and see.
Maybe there'll be a Siri buttons.
Siri?
Siri, whatever.
Like
whatever.
The bus Suris?
No, like the daughter of what's her face. Anyways, the other thing that I will say is that I didn't realize that this actually supposedly had a faster fingerprint reader, and it's noticeably faster than the Pixel 1, and the Pixel 1 was fast, but it definitely unlocks faster, and I think it's more accurate too from what I read. Other notes that I just want to toss in here is that out of the box, the colors are messed up. I will say that if you did not hear about this, when Google made the Pixel 2, they decided that they wanted to take a more au natural approach. And that's what they decided to do, is make it more natural. And so they didn't want to go up that oversaturated route that so many phones do, including the Pixel 1. So people get their phones and they look at the Pixel 2 and they go, wow, this looks dull. Now, they did end up patching that, and I will say that when I pulled out my Pixel 2 and I looked at it and I went, this is really dull compared to a Pixel 1. And I was glad that I had heard about the problem, because I would have probably been a little bit worried about the screen given all of the Pixel 2 XL problems, but all there is just a little setting that they ended up pushing out, and now you got 3 different levels of saturated. On the most saturated, it looks exactly like my Pixel 1 did. For me, I actually opted for the middle, so it's not super dull. It's a little bit saturated, but it's more kind of what Google wanted to go, and I think it's a nice balance. It definitely doesn't look as bright as a Samsung, but that's because Samsung is notorious for oversaturating their screen colors. But if you want to do that, you can just quickly turn that on. The other thing as well is, I didn't realize this, but apparently Android added this cool night mode to it, and what it essentially does is you can schedule this night mode so that it takes the whites and it actually makes them a little bit yellow between certain hours, and it's supposed to help you fall asleep easier. It's supposed to be easier on your eyes in the middle of the night. And I didn't realize that this was a thing until I got my Pixel 2 and it was activated on there. And I went back and I looked at the Pixel 1 before I sent it off, and sure enough, it was an option on there. So if you haven't checked this out on your Android phone, see if you got it, because I turned it on and it looks really ugly, but when I wake up in the middle of the night or I'm trying to fall asleep, it is noticeable. It is much less harsh on my eyes than the regular color mode, and it's a feature that I've grown to appreciate.
So it's a blue light filter mode that you've seen in a lot of people were putting apps out for it for Android, until Android basically said, yeah, that's a good idea. We're going to do that. And iOS also has it too. If you're an iOS user, you can enable night mode and set your time range and stuff, because I've turned it on my iPad, but I care a little less because we've talked about in this show before, the glasses I wear, they have blue light filters in them. So it takes out that more harsh aspect of the light that is not eye damaging, but eye straining, for lack of a better term.
Stephen, I could tell that you have really an important need for this in the middle of the night now, because after your breakup with Chris, and he needs to be with his fiance now, then you are alone and afraid during the middle of the night. So you wake up.
That's very true. Very, very true.
That's fair.
Also, really quick points here. Number one, the camera is noticeably better. I touched on that earlier. The only weird quirk that I've seen is that in low light conditions, the video seems more grainy, but it does seem clearer. It seems overall a better picture, but it looks kind of like that grainy low light that you get on like a DSLR, but I'm okay with it. It's just overall a better picture, just a little bit more grainy. And then also it does have the IP67 waterproofing as opposed to the IP53 water resistance that the Pixel 1 had. So overall, pretty good. Obviously, I'm not going to say it was worth my money because it was a warranty upgrade, but definitely a noticeable upgrade from the Pixel 1. And again, made just like the Pixel 1 because it is not the Pixel 2 XL, which was made by a different company.
LG.
I wasn't going to name names. Any questions on that, Chris or SP?
I'm super jealous because I missed out on a deal to get a new phone that I don't need, but I just really want. And I'm still leaning heavily towards a Pixel 2 XL. So I'm jealous that you have a Pixel 2, Stephen.
I do have a question that you did not cover, and it is the difference between the storage size between your Pixel 1 and the Pixel 2.
Yes, that's a good question. And the Pixel 1 started at 32 gigs. That was the baseline. And then the Pixel 2 was a 64. So I did end up getting a natural free upgrade out of it.
And how much free space do you have on your 2 versus the 1?
The 1 I had about a gigabyte. Now I have about 32 gigabytes.
Okay. So it was definitely time for that expansion of memory. And I just personally, I don't know if I would get a phone that was 64. I'd lean towards 128 nowadays. But I mean, if 64 is all you can get, definitely go with 64 or 32. 32 is not going to get you anywhere these days.
Yeah, 32 was a little bit, it was a lot too small. Okay, it was a lot too small. But there you go. That's going to take us past Steven's geeky stuff. But before we do wrap up, we put a little poll out there, and we thought we would talk briefly about that on the show this week.
Was it a brass pole? Was it a wooden pole, like a fence pole?
The brass pole is only something that Chris and I know about, and it stays in his bedroom. The Twitter...
In your private Slack group? Is that what you guys have a private Slack group, don't you?
Anyways, this poll was on Twitter at twitter.com/GonnaGeek, and we asked this question. We said, if you were able to get new release movies at home, would you be willing to pay? And then we put out 4 options. Now, Twitter only allows 4 options with very limited characters. So we said the same as the theater price, a little bit more than the theater price, a little under the theater price, or I'd just go to the theater. We had a whopping 8% say I'd go to the theater. We had another 8% say I'll pay a little bit more than the theater price. 38% got runner-up with a little under the theater price, and 46% said same as the theater price.
Same as the theater price is why you'll never see this happening.
I agree. I will say this, that for me personally, I would probably pay a little bit more than the theater price, because the reason why I would do that is, number one, I get the comfort of my own home. Number two, I don't have to arrange to have my kids watch. I can just start the movie whenever I want. It's a heck of a lot more convenient. And the other thing too, is I can have a bunch of people in the same room. So generally speaking, it's going to be a little bit more of a social experience. So I would pay a little bit more myself. And again, I'm not paying those massive concession prices.
Well, the problem is, just like you said, you'd have more people in the room than you did to buy said movie to watch there. And it's a lot easier to pirate something if you take it outside of a controlled environment. That's not to say that 90% of people wouldn't, but nothing stops me from sitting there with my cell phone and be like, ha ha ha, I'm going to put the whole movie on Snapchat or something like that. I don't know if you can do that on Snapchat. It could have been a poor example, but the same thought works there, is that it'd be relatively easy to get a poor camera quality copy out there. Now, there's probably stuff in place to prevent you from putting like a video capture card between your TV and whatever box they sell you to do this. But I mean, there's products that exist that do this. And if you're rich, you can afford to do it, because it's something like thousands of dollars to screen a single movie. And you have to use custom hardware you buy direct from them, which is also thousands of dollars. It is not a cheap thing. And for a person that, I don't know, I would just spend the $10 to go to the movie theater over having to deal with all that. Plus, I have Movie Pass. I don't care. I pay $10 a month and see all the movies I want.
Yeah, Movie Pass. I'm Chris Farrell. I'm amazing.
It's because I didn't have kids.
And you live in the States, okay? Let's make it clear. Movie Pass is not in Canada.
I'm going to have to use the Bandrew Scott. It depends. We'll have to see, I believe, is what he says all the time on the Bandrew Says podcast. And it's really going to depend on how many movie theaters still exist. And if more and more movie theaters go bankrupt, close, then the movie makers will have to search for other distribution systems. I have no idea how long we're talking about before all this comes to reality. Are we talking 2 years? Are we talking 5? Are we talking 10 years? I think eventually it's going to happen, just because the technology is going to be there, and it's just going to be harder and harder to do. Now, I say that, and I thought video arcades would be dead 10 years ago, and there's still some around. So I don't know.
Maybe this all stems back because I'm well, okay, let me ask you this. What's your go-to snack of choice? What's your snack of choice? If you're going to watch a movie at home, snack of choice, what is it?
Mini carrots.
Okay, mini carrots. Chris?
Popcorn.
See, I'm a chips and dip kind of guy, and you try to smuggle that into the theater, it's just a mess. So that's why I probably pay a little more. You just gotta
smuggle better. Cargo pockets, man.
Yeah, I mean, you're in Canada, the parka. I mean, just buy a bigger parka. You can fit that stuff right in your own refrigerator and everything.
Look, guys, in college, we smuggled in a 12 by 12 inch cookie cake and ate that and had root beer floats in the back of the movie theater. If you want to smuggle stuff in, you can do it. I mean, it was the most unsubtle thing ever. We literally put jackets over my friend's arm, all of our jackets, and he had the cookie cake under there and just walked in with it. Simple, easy.
How smushed was the cookie cake?
It wasn't. It was in a plastic container. It was perfectly fine.
Let's be honest. Does the kid getting paid $8 an hour really care? Does he really care?
Depending on the theater, some of them do. The local theater here now, if they catch you with candy, they'll sometimes tell you to throw it out because there might happen to be a dollar store literally right next to the movie theater that sells movie theater size candy for $1 a piece. And I may happen to wear carpenter jeans into a movie because it's easy to smuggle stuff in. And if I walk too fast, you may hear a of the M&Ms shaking around. So I've had to alter my gait. Yes, my vitamins.
Yeah, they opened a movie theater about 5 years ago, literally in an unused parking lot or portion of the parking lot of the mall, which has a dollar store and a grocery store. So that's no win. But we want to know, what would you pay? Would you pay the same as the theater price, a little bit more than the theater price, a little under the theater price, or you just go to the theater? Please do let us know. It is show@gonnageek.com, or just head on over to gonnageek.com. But there you go. That is going to take us to the end of episode number 228 of the official gonnageek.com show. I'm Stephen John Drew saying thanks for checking out the show. And if you do listen to us, please let us know if you listen on iTunes.
And I'm SP saying, if you haven't checked out the Olympics, you better do so now because they're going away.
And I am Chris saying Stephen is a robot.
I am a robot. I am a robot. Bye.
He runs on iOS.
For the next 2 minutes.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the official GonnaGeek.com show. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or a thumbs up on YouTube. You can always join us for our live recording sessions, which stream Mondays at 8:45 p.m. Eastern at www.geeks.live. And remember, you can find our full back catalog at gonnageek.com/show. If you're itching for more geeky content, check out other shows on GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Voice work was by Emily Prokop of the Story Behind podcast. That's it for this episode. We hope to see you back again next week.